In recent times, a concerning trend has emerged in education systems across the globe: the banning of Black history in schools. This censorship not only erases the rich story of African American heritage, but also perpetuates ignorance and systemic racism. In this video, we'll delve into the motivations behind these bans, explore their detrimental effects on students' understanding of history and identity, and discuss strategies for resistance. Join us as we uncover the truth behind why they are banning Black history in schools and what we can do to fight back against this dangerous trend. All right, let's break down what's been happening in Florida regarding the banning of AP African American History. The Florida Department of Education decided to ban this course because they felt it was teaching students about things like activism and intersectionality. They even said it was encouraging support for Black trans, queer, and gender non-conforming individuals. Sounds like a lot to take in, right? So, Governor Ron DeSantis, who's been in the headlines for his controversial moves, rejected a request to keep this class in high schools. This happened right around the time he was asking universities for info on trans students. It seems like there's a pattern here, doesn't it? Now, DeSantis's administration is pretty clear about their views. They straight up said that teaching about topics like Black queer studies goes against state laws. They even called out the class for lacking educational value and historical accuracy. But here's the kicker: they didn't explain why. The document from the Department of Education also criticizes the teaching of intersectionality. They say it's linked to critical race theory, but they don't explain how. And they're not fans of topics like reparations either, saying they don't offer a balanced perspective. They even had an issue with including the work of author Bell Hooks in the curriculum. She talked about white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, and that didn't sit well with them. DeSantis isn't exactly hiding his feelings about being woke. He even passed a law banning critical race theory in schools, although he couldn't prove it was being taught there in the first place. On the first day of Black History Month in 2023, the College Board, the big company behind those advanced placement courses, decided to shake things up with their African American Studies course. But it wasn't exactly smooth sailing. They got a ton of heat from the right-wing crowd for including books by Black authors that were seen as too liberal, progressive, or radical. Yep, there was quite a fuss about it, and the College Board even had to say sorry later on. Now, enter Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. He's been leading the charge on this whole book-banning crusade and trying to muzzle certain ideas in schools. And guess what? He's got some pals who share his views. During the 2020-2021 school year, more than 900 school districts across the country were caught up in this whole mess. They were part of a deliberate campaign to shut down anything related to critical race theory, according to the Conflict Campaign. That's a whopping 35% of all students in elementary, middle, and high schools affected by this. But here's the thing. Instead of just pointing fingers at the College Board and trying to kick them out of schools, maybe we should be pushing for more Black studies to be taught. After all, representation matters, right? Now, this isn't the first time politicians have tried to squash Black studies from being taught in schools. Usually, these bans pop up right after there's been some serious unrest in the streets, like protests led by Black and multiracial groups. It's not just about banning books, though. Academic folks with radical ideas have often found themselves pushed to the sidelines or straight up kicked out. And it's not just colleges. High schools get in on the action too. They're not always the most supportive when it comes to setting up Black study programs. They'll slash funding for those programs while beefing up the budget for more policing. But you know what? Despite all that, people have fought back. It's because of this kind of resistance that Black studies programs even exist in the first place. Take the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, for example. They were all about political education and getting folks organized, especially in the South during the 1960s. And guess what? Their work inspired a whole bunch of students to get involved in civil rights movements all across the country. All right, let's keep this story rolling. So, after getting trained by groups like the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, some fresh recruits jumped right into action during the Freedom Summer of 1964. This was a big deal. SNCC and another group called the Congress of Racial Equality, CORE, brought in thousands of student volunteers to help out in Mississippi. Their mission: to set up freedom schools, basically educational hubs for Black folks who had been oppressed for way too long. Now, these freedom school instructors weren't just teaching your typical subjects like math and history. Nope, they were diving deep into some heavy topics. Think race riots, inequality, and the role of Black people in shaping the future. They asked some thought-provoking questions too, like should the white community get its act together and deal with racial issues already? And what about money? Should some folks have a ton while others barely scrape by? Deep stuff, right? After the Freedom Summer, a bunch of these student volunteers decided to head back to college. Why? Well, one big reason was to dodge the military draft. It was a scary time with war looming overhead. As the late 60s rolled around, college campuses started heating up with protests. James P. Garrett, who had his hands in SNCC, CORE, and even the Communist Party, was a key player in all this. He helped kickstart what became known as the Black Campus Movement. With Garrett and his crew leading the charge, the first Black Student Union, BSU, and Black Studies programs were born. These weren't just about hitting the books. They were about building power and solidarity among Black and other oppressed groups. And get this, the BSU didn't play favorites. If you were Black, you were automatically part of the crew, whether you were a student, faculty, staff, or just someone from the community. So, you see, it wasn't just about schooling. It was about building a movement, one that shook up campuses and communities alike. And it all started with folks like Garrett, who weren't afraid to stand up and fight for what they believed in. Be sure to give this video a like if you are enjoying the content. The fight for Black Studies wasn't just about adding another class to the curriculum. Nope, it was way deeper than that. Folks like Garrett and his crew saw it as a chance to shake things up, to awaken minds, and to empower communities. Instead of just prepping students for tests, they wanted to spark something bigger. They wanted to raise awareness among folks who had been pushed to the sidelines, both on campus and off. They wanted to make sure university resources didn't just stay within the ivory towers, but helped the surrounding Black community. And most importantly, they wanted to light a fire under students, urging them to get involved in all sorts of activism. They didn't stop at just talking the talk, though. Nope, they walked the walk. Over at San Francisco State University, SFSU, the Black Student Union and a group called the Third World Liberation Front got busy. They took cues from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, and even the Black Panther Party, setting up programs to educate and mobilize. Off campus, they teamed up with labor and union groups, started tutoring programs for low-income students of color, and even kicked off a breakfast program, just like the Black Panthers did. And get this, they didn't wait for potential Black students to come to them. Oh no, they went out and found them, then made sure they were ready to hit the ground running with a crash course in political education. So, you see, the fight for Black Studies wasn't just about books and classes. It was about building bridges, empowering communities, and paving the way for a brighter future. And it all started with folks like Garrett and his crew, who weren't afraid to roll up their sleeves and get to work. The fight for representation and justice didn't end with the establishment of Black Studies programs. Nope, it only got stronger. The Black and Multiracial Coalition kept pushing, both on campus and in their communities. Their biggest moment came with a 5-month strike against the university. Students, staff, and faculty joined forces, demanding change. They had 10 demands, all aimed at raising awareness, building Black Studies programs, and shifting resources off campus. But things got heated. There were clashes between protesters and the police, and even reports of a racist professor being tossed out of a second-story window by protesters. It was intense, to say the least. But you know what? The university eventually caved. They met the students' demands and officially launched the country's first Black Studies program. It was a huge win for the movement. Now let's talk about how all this ties into what's happening today. You see, those book-banning efforts we're seeing, they're part of a bigger backlash against the Black liberation movement that's been gaining steam since the tragic murder of Trayvon Martin in 2012. The ideas and demands of this movement are simple, yet powerful. Freedom from police violence, quality housing, universal health care, basically, a world free from the evils of racism, capitalism, and militarism. But here's the thing. Those ideas aren't just found in thin air. Nope, they're in the very same books that some folks want to ban. Why? Because they know that when people get inspired by these ideas, they start fighting for change. And that's something they want to stop, plain and simple. But here's the good news. They don't have to win. Nope. Just like those students, teachers, and community members fought back against repression in the past, we can do the same today. We can keep organizing, keep pushing for radical, free, and accessible education for all. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. Fighting for a better, more just world for everyone. All right, let's dive into why some folks are not keen on having Black history taught in schools. You see, learning about Black history isn't just about memorizing facts and dates. It's about empowerment and shaking up the status quo. When students, especially Black students, learn about the struggles, triumphs, and contributions of their ancestors, it's like giving them a superpower. It's saying, hey, you come from a rich heritage of resilience and greatness. That's pretty powerful stuff, right? But here's the thing. Some people aren't too thrilled about that. Why? Because knowledge is power. When you know where you come from and the challenges your ancestors faced, it changes you. It makes you question things. It makes you demand better. And let's be real, change can be scary for some folks. The idea of Black students feeling empowered and questioning the status quo, that's like a nightmare for those who benefit from keeping things the way they are. Think about it like this. If you've been sitting comfortably on the top of the social ladder for years, the last thing you want is for someone to come along and shake it up. Teaching Black history challenges the narratives of superiority and dominance that some people hold dear. It's like pulling the rug out from under their feet. So instead of embracing this opportunity for growth and understanding, some folks push back. They resist the inclusion of Black history in schools because they're afraid of what might happen if the truth comes out. They're afraid of losing their grip on power. But here's the kicker. Change is inevitable. Society evolves, and so does our understanding of history. By resisting the inclusion of Black history in schools, these folks are just delaying the inevitable. And in doing so, they're holding back progress for everyone. So, let's flip the script. Let's embrace the power of knowledge and celebrate the rich story of Black history. Because when we do, we're not just teaching history, we're shaping the future. And that's something worth fighting for. Let's take a look at the early 1950s in Prince Edward County, Virginia. A courageous teenager named Barbara Johns was fed up with the subpar conditions at her segregated school, Moton High. So, what did she do? At just 16 years old, she rallies her fellow students and leads a strike to demand better. Can you believe it? A teenager standing up to the system like that. Now, Barbara's actions didn't just spark a local protest. They caught the attention of the NAACP, leading to a landmark case that would change the course of history. That's right, I'm talking about Brown versus Board of Education. In 1954, the Supreme Court ruled that segregation in public schools was unconstitutional. It was a huge win for the civil rights movement and a major step towards equality in education. But the fight didn't stop there. Fast forward to 1964, and we've got another game changer, the Civil Rights Act. This legislation outlawed discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. And you know what that means? No more separate and unequal schools. It was a victory for equality and a testament to the power of grassroots activism. Speaking of grassroots activism, let's talk about the Black Panther Party. In 1969, they launched their Free Breakfast for Children program. Why? Because they saw the link between education and nutrition. They knew that hungry kids can't learn, so they stepped up to provide free meals to children in underserved communities. Now that's what I call putting your beliefs into action. And let's not forget about ongoing efforts to promote Black history in schools. Organizations like the NAACP have been fighting for decades to ensure that Black history is included in curricula. They've taken legal action, organized protests, and lobbied lawmakers to make it happen. It's all about recognizing the contributions of Black Americans and telling the full story of our country's history. So what's the takeaway from all of this? Well, it's simple. Change doesn't happen overnight, and it certainly doesn't happen without a fight. But when people come together and demand better, amazing things can happen. As we wrap up this eye-opening journey into the topic of why some are attempting to ban Black history from schools, I want to leave you with a few key thoughts. Firstly, knowledge is power, and understanding the full scope of history, including the struggles and triumphs of Black Americans, is essential for building a more inclusive and equitable society. By denying students the opportunity to learn about Black history, we're not just doing them a disservice, but perpetuating ignorance and inequality. Secondly, change starts with us. Whether it's signing petitions, advocating for policy reform, or supporting grassroots initiatives, each of us has a role to play in ensuring that Black history is not only taught, but celebrated in schools. Now, I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this important issue? Do you believe Black history should be taught in schools? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this video informative and thought-provoking, don't forget to give it a like and share it with your friends and family. Together, we can spark meaningful conversations and drive positive change. And remember, the journey doesn't end here. Be sure to check out other videos on YouTube that delve deeper into topics related to history, social justice, and education. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell to stay updated on future content. Thank you for watching. And until next time, let's continue striving for a world where everyone's story is heard and valued.